Corsair airplane. I've already created a file that has the top, the bottom, this left and the right view of this airplane, as well as the front view. This gives us this kind of nice little outline here lined up to help us build our model. In this demonstration, I do have some keyboard shortcuts I'm going to be utilizing, so you will see whatever buttons I press will be over here. So you can see the ones I'm using as well as me naming them in the actual video. So for this, we are going to start by creating a cylinder and placing it in the middle and starting to create the body. So I want to make sure my 3D cursor is actually in the center there. So you can use your cursor over here and then go ahead and just place that in the center. And that's where our cylinder will spawn from. So I'm going to go ahead and say add a mesh and then cylinder. This will spawn a cylinder in the middle of my view plane. I am currently in wireframe mode, so if I went to shaded mode, you can see that it is consuming my entire area here, and I'm going to focus on these dialog settings over here so that we get them about the same. I'm going to reduce the amount of vertices, mostly because the more complex it is, the harder it will be to edit. Although it will be nicer and smoother, we want to make sure that we also maintain an easeability into editing. I'm also going to reduce my radius here and my depth to bring them small enough, because what I want to do is sort of consume the front part of this airplane. I'm going to go ahead and also rotate this on the y-axis 90 degrees so that it is set up. Also, if I look to the right, now I can move this thing into place. So I'm going to say my location X, bring it forward a bit, and this will also help me reduce my radius to be about the height that we'd like it. Move it up on the Z-axis. And get into position exactly about as close as you can to the outline of the side of this reference image. So if I zoom in, you can see that what I'm trying to do is match up the end of my cylinder to the actual image. It may not be perfect, but we want to get it as close as we can. That gives me a nice little starting spot. Now that I am there, I'm going to go ahead and press and click away to finish that command. And now I'm going to look at this from the side. And we're going to go into edit mode. And what we want to do is extrude along the edge of this airplane so that we can build that shape. So I'm going to use my face selection tool here. Click on the face selection, and I'm going to press E to extrude. And I want to extrude only along the x-axis, so I press X to constrain it to this axis. I'm going to bring it out to about right here. You can see that my shape is no longer following the shape of the actual airplane. We have this curve that has gone up, yet our cylinder has not. So I'm going to press S to scale, and I'm going to press Z because I'm only actually scaling along the Z axis. And we want to make sure we're doing that by actually looking above as well to ensure that we have not scaled along the y-axis and made this thing gone further. So that is following along a little bit. You'll also see me doing some loop selections. So if I press down the Option key and select with my edge selection tool this edge, you can see that it's also a little bit small. So I'm going to say scale again on the Z-axis and bring that up so that it matches the model of my airplane. Those are the basic steps we're going to use, and we're going to keep repeating those. Again, back to my face selection tool, selecting my face, E to extrude, and I'm going to come all the way out. Now we're going to cut the cockpit out separately. So I'm going to pretend like those windows are not there, but I do need to scale this thing up again on the Z-axis. And I'm going to grab with my G key along the Z-axis up so that it matches because it may not match as well as you'd think it would. So scale again along the z-axis until it fits about that top of that cockpit. Again, you can see we have a little bit of extrusion here along the bottom. I'm going to grab Z, move that up, scale my Z, bring it down a little bit. And you're kind of going to have to play with this. It matches exactly what you're hoping for. Okay, another extrusion here. Extrude along the x-axis, move this thing out further. We can kind of go through a little bit bigger chunks here. Select to about right here, scale along the Z, move this thing in, grab along the Z, move it down, and there we go. Our main body is coming into focus here. Remember to look at these things from all sorts of angles to ensure that you got it going what you want. You can see here that although we have been scaling, we are not scaling inwards. So scaling here along the y-axis will help make this thing match from the top. And we want to make sure we're actually doing that. If you need to move some spaces, you can do that as well. We just want to make sure that we are following along this edge as well as the edges top and bottom when we look at it from our x and our z-axis. Okay, so keep moving along. We're going to extrude again. This time I'm going to bring it a lot further in, and I'm going to hit scale, bring this thing down. If I'm looking at this from my y-axis, I can just scale my z or my z. Grab it along the z, move here. Make any adjustments you need to. And then look at this from the top. Make sure that we're also coming in, scaling along the y, so that we fit within our model, just like so. And then repeat that again, bring it all the way out to the end. This time I'm going to scale down, make sure that I'm fitting within the top. I'm going to grab along the X to move this off a little bit. And let's see, grab or scale from the Z again, bring this in, grab Z, move down. And we're going to round that off separately later. Or actually, we can just kind of do it now. I'm going to bring this out a little bit and scale down a little bit. And then we're going to go ahead and bevel this to make this round. So here's my bevel selection. I'm going to push this inwards. I'll make sure I'm on my edges. I'm going to use 1% in this case and go ahead and give this thing a little bit of a bevel with a couple more segments to make this round. There we go. Okay, so that's our general shape there. We can get some more detailing later, but that is the basics of that part. In the front, I'm also going to want to model this front. So I'm going to go ahead and select this edge. We're going to extrude again along the x-axis, bring this in, and just like what we did with the front, but this time I'm going to do it with the edge selection. So I'm going to select these edges. You can go ahead and hold down Option to loop select, and then we will bevel this one inward, wait for this vertices to come up, and then bring that in. And we want to increase the segments to make it actually round, not too much, and adjust as needed, and that will bring us the front as we hope. Now I'm going to actually model the inside of the engine compartment. I'm going to select my front face, and I'm going to use the Inset Faces tool, and this will allow me to bring in an edge. And then I'm going to extrude along the X and actually bring that one inward, so I create that little sort of a face there. Again, inset, and this time we're going to inset quite a bit of a ways because this is what's going to hold on to the propeller. So I'm going to bring that in. Go ahead and scale that just a little bit more. And then extrude along the X and kind of bring this thing out to the propeller, but then scale down the whole thing so it has kind of a point to it. And that there is our basic body. The next thing we need to do is to actually cut out the top of this here. So I'm going to go back into selection mode. And if I were to put this into wireframe, you can see that there is a cockpit here that needs to get cut out. And we're going to do that using our knife tool. I'm going to remain in wireframe mode so that I can actually see these cutaways. So using the knife tool, in case you're not sure, it is right here. It's also K as a keyboard shortcut. I'm going to make sure I'm looking at this from the y-axis. And I'm going to use this knife tool. I'm going to kind of click. So think of this as playing connect the dots in a way. We're going to try to follow along. It's best if we can match along actual edges, which you can do sometimes, but not all the time. If not, you can go ahead and just click that in. In this demonstration, I'm actually going to sort of skip this little extra edge I got there, just for detailing purposes. And then click all the way until the top, then press return when you are done. And that creates a cutout inside of our body. Now we need to do this on the other side, so let's go look at the other side and sort of follow along. You can actually see your existing cut, and you want to follow that as closely as possible so these are nice and parallel. So with my knife tool, select here, follow along, get as far into that as you can. And then press return. Now it looks pretty good, but if we look at this from the top, you will see that it is too wide. And what we need to do is actually select those things and then scale them. And we're going to actually select using edges this time. We're going to select all of these edges that will be part of that. Make sure you select carefully. Now again, back into wireframe. We want to look at this from the top, scale on the y-axis, and bring these guys inwards. There we go. That matches pretty well. Looking pretty good. So our next thing to do here is we're going to actually do an inset face again. The reason I'm doing this is because we want to maintain those faces, because we're going to, as you saw, I inset just a little bit, and then they're going to extrude downwards, and that actually creates our cockpit. We could also get rid of that bump by go ahead and right-clicking, then saying dissolve faces, and then F to fill it, so now we have a flat bottom. And that is our cockpit. If we need to make some other adjustments, we can do that as well, like these points here and here. We want to scale those along the Y and bring them in just to make it a nice little flat area. And that is our main cockpit and our main body. In the next lesson, we'll actually learn to actually create the outline of the cockpit and build that framing in. Thank you, guys. Now that we have created the main body, I want to create the little bars or bands that are going to outline our cockpit area. To do this, I'm going to select the main body, and by the way, you should name this main body in your Explorer over here. And what we want to do is go into edit mode and select that outline edge. I'm going to use my edge selection tool. I'm going to press Option and select that outside edge. That is what we're going to utilize to create the outside border of our actual cockpit. Now, currently it is connected to this main body, and we don't want it to be connected. We want to actually duplicate this and then separate it as its own object. To do that, we're going to press Shift D to duplicate it. If I remove my mouse, you can actually see that it is duplicated. We don't want to move it in space away, so I'm going to press Escape. But then I'm going to press P, And P will allow me to separate this thing by selection. So I'm going to use the by selection part. And what's happened is that now in my world outliner, I have a new object with that same name, but .001, that is going to be the cockpit outline. So I'm going to go back into mode selection here and go ahead and select that object. And you can see if I grab along the Y, it does do the exact thing as we had before. And this is what we want to use. Now this is currently a mesh, and we wish that it was not a mesh. We want it to be a curve. So I'm actually going to go up to Object here, and then go down to Convert, and convert this to a curve. Now that it's a curve, I can go ahead and change the geometry on this, and make sure that in my Curve tab over here, we're going to use Round, and here is our depth. And our depth is actually going to be pretty small, 0.04 probably. I meant to be 0.004 to give us a sort of an edge along our body that will be our cockpit edge. That is one part of what we need to do. The next thing we need to do is, if we look at this from the top in wireframe mode, you can see that there is a bar going across and two that are going in. So my next step is to go ahead and create those. I'm going to go ahead and move my 3D cursor to that space that I want to connect it to, which is about right there. And then I'm going to say Add Curve and a Bezier curve. Now it's going to come in quite large, so we're going to go ahead and scale that along the x-axis. Bring it in quite a ways. I'm going to get this kind of a funny looking shape, and that's okay. We can scale that along the y-axis as well if we want to make it a little bit less fat. There we go. There is a main area for it to be, and then I'm going to go into edit mode and change the paths. Now again, looking at this from the top, I want to make sure my first point is right along the starting point of where this band will be, which is about right there. And then I'm going to scale this whole thing in so that I don't have these crazy long paths, and then select this second node and bring it to where it will start to change. I'm going to also rotate this along the z-axis and scale on the x-axis and bring this in so it becomes kind of a straight line. Rotate again. That is a pretty straight line there. And then we will extrude using the E key. Creates a new path for me here. And that I want to have at the bottom. Rotate along the Z. Push that up. Now this middle point, it's a curve currently right now. If you press V and say vector, it will straighten out. And then we want to look at this from the side. So our first point is kind of matching. You can see it's matching the top of my model there. That's great. The second point, I could move it in a little bit here. And then my third point is way up in space. So I'm going to grab that and move it all the way down to the bottom and make any other adjustments. So I'm going to take my scale and bring that inwards. And then there we go. Look at it from the top again. I'm following along the match line, and I'm bringing it down. It matches on the top, and it also matches on the side, which is great. Your model may come down this way a little bit, it may be slightly different, but I'm following the model body I did, and that is going to be just fine. So from this point, I'm going to go back into my non-wireframe mode here, and I'm going to give this that same 0.004 depth. Looks like it's a little bit skinny here. Let's go a little bit more on that. Let's go 0.5. Well, that's much too much. Make any adjustments you need to here. And that is our object, okay? So now that I have this thing, I want to make the exact same thing but on the other side. So I don't actually have to make it. I can instead go to my Modifiers tab and then go up to Add Modifier and tell this thing to mirror. Now it wants to naturally mirror along the x-axis. I'm going to change that from x to y. And you can see it's too close, so we want to actually create a mirror body. That mirror body is going to be this right object there. That way it mirrors across it. And we might have to test to see, make sure I mirrored this properly. There we go. So now I have both of them going over across the edge, which is great. I could also make adjustments here. So if I need to select the end of this and bring it down, it'll do both of them at the same time, which is a very handy feature. So now for the cross beam that goes across, if I go back into wireframe mode, so you can see I'm going to need a cross beam here. And we'll make some adjustments to this other one as well, but I'm going to focus on making this cross beam. I did go into object mode, so I'm no longer in editing mode of that other top beam. And I'm going to create a new shape here. So adding my 3D cursor, and then add a curve that is a Bezier curve. Again, I'm still in object mode, so I'm going to scale this thing down. And go ahead and start from here. So it's at the bottom. I'm going to go back into edit mode, and I'm going to make sure that one of those points is at the bottom, at that cursor point. I'm going to go ahead and select this guy to do that. So grab along the x-axis, move it in. Look at this from the top. He is on the x-axis there. Look at it from the side, the y. He seems to be good there as well. Now I'm going to select the other end of this point. It's kind of hard to see. You want to make sure you're keeping track of that. If you need to uncheck some of these other objects, that'll also help so that they're not in your way. Here is my main body. I want to make sure this guy goes first from the X view. I'm going to grab him along the Z so that he goes up, and then grab along the Y so I can bring him in. Y. Bring that into the center. So the idea here is I'm going to bring it to the center so that I can also mirror this one and not have to deal with it not quite being perfect in terms of left to right. Go ahead and adjust your handles as well. We're going to rotate along the Z often to bring it in, and then scale, bring it that way. What kind of error adjustments you need to do to make sure that it is looking correct. Again, I'm also making these, pressing V for vector so that they are nice and straight. Okay, so now I have this from the top. Looks like I've matched along. It's doing pretty good. Again, this is a curve, so we're going to go ahead and do a depth there of 0.004. Look at this in our other mode and make sure that it is working the way you would expect. Could use a little bit more depth there. I'm going to go ahead and bump that up some. And it could use some adjustments on our actual placements here. I'm going to go ahead and visually move this thing to sort of match up with our other areas here. Grab, and then I'm going to extrude in a little bit so that I have that sort of bend, that sort of shape right there. Great. Now, definitely you can go ahead and get in some more details, spend some time making this look exactly right. I can't bore you to death too much with trying to line things up perfectly, but that is that part of it, and we also are going to mirror this. So in our modifiers tab, we're going to go to mirror, and I want to mirror again using that same right, or even the body, and then choosing the correct axis. In our case it's the z-axis, and now that thing is mirrored. You can see that I am not lined up perfectly on this side, and that is okay because we can grab that, move it outwards, and grab and move it down a little bit, and make sure that our other thing is on, and it will match on the other side, just as we expect. So that is how you make the outside ribs of your Corsair cockpit. So the last thing I want to do here is actually create the glass that goes on the inside. I'm going to go ahead and hide so I can see just this part that I've created so far. I have done some detailing and clean it up a little bit, and you can do that as well. But what we want to do is take this and name all of these parts. So this is my cockpit surround, and we want to make sure we name everything. This is my cockpit crossbar, and then of course we have the cockpit top bars. So with my cockpit surround, this is a curve right now, and I want to go ahead and duplicate that. So again, I'm going to use Shift D to duplicate this, or if you'd like, you can also just copy and paste objects or duplicate objects like this. And what that'll do is give me this again as another object. I'm going to go ahead and call this the cockpit glass, because we're going to make the glass. And this is a curve currently right now, but we actually don't want it to have any depth. We want this to actually become object convert to a mesh. So I'm going to go ahead and go into editing mode on this cockpit curve, select all, and then fill. And this gives me a filled sort of object, and it's not the right shape, but that's okay. That's what we're going to do, is cut it so it does become the right shape. So this created all this outside shape for me, which is nice. We can then use the knife tool to go ahead and just cut where our curve bars are, like so, and do that everywhere there is a cross beam. Here's the last one here. And now that gives me all the stuff that I need information-wise to make this work out for me. So now I can go back into selection mode, select just this center edge right there. And what we want to do is grab that guy and move him up along the Z until he touches the tops of our bars, and voila, we have our glass pane. Now we may need to make some adjustments on some of these edges to make sure they come down. They might be a little bit too sharp, but that is the basics of it. You might want to do some edge selection here, so I'm going to go ahead and select this point here and grab it along the Z and move it down so that it fits a little bit better. However you want. This will work for us as well. Select here, grab along. It looks like we actually need to grab this along the Y a little bit. Push that in. There we go. Select this one, grab along the Y. Move that one inwards. X if you need to. And sort of just make those point adjustments as required. Grab this one along the X, bring that in so we can see those bars nice and beautiful. Grab X again, bring that in. And that is how you make the glass pane. We'll color this a different material and be on our way. Thanks. So now we have completed the cockpit. It's also recommended that you actually collect all of your objects, your cockpit objects, into a single collection. You can do this by selecting them all and then right-clicking and saying move to collection and create new collection. You also want to name these objects so that you can refer to them easier later. The next thing we want to do is create the wings. So I'm going to go ahead and hide the main body and hide my cockpit object. And you can see that we have these wings out here. And there's actually a missing image. So up here in the left-hand corner, there's a UV map image. And we're going to select that. And what that'll do is show us all of the images in one sheet. And in here, there is the outlines of the wings. So this right here refers to the actual shape of the wings. So what I want to do is actually, I'm going to hide for temporarily my top and my bottom and also the right side. And what we want to do is create a new object that is the shape of that particular profile. I'm going to use my cursor, 3D cursor, and select it here and look at this flat. If you have not, you also might want to change this mode here. This is an isometric versus a perspective mode, and we don't want to be in perspective mode. We want to be in isometric so that we can see the XY positions flat, or in this case, the XZ position. Now I'm going to add, and in this case, I'm going to add a circle. And the circle is going to come in flat, so we want to rotate this on the x-axis 90 degrees so we can see the circle. By default, it may be larger. I've had to shrink mine down to about 0.21 or so, and that gives me a nice round circle that I can start manipulating to change into this shape. Go ahead and go into edit mode, and you can see that I have got 4 points. I'm going to select the far left point, grab and move along the x-axis. Make sure you constrain your axis here. Since we are working with a flat object, we definitely don't want to accidentally move into 3D space because it will affect the amount of segments we will have later. We also want to move the rest of these points. So I'm going to grab this one and move it down as well along the z-axis. And we want to scale those handles in to make them smaller and rotate along the y-axis to make sure they straighten out. You're going to do this with each individual anchor and handles to make sure they come in. I do recommend this one on the right hand side that you turn that into a vector by pressing V and selecting vector, so that gives a nice sharp point. Along here as well, grab along the z-axis, move this upward, and then scale in to make sure that it is fitting that curve as well as you can. Back here to the last curve here, we want to scale that inwards. And this doesn't have to be perfect, but you want to make it as nice as you can. So there is our general shape. For demonstration purposes, I'm not going to spend too much time trying to make this absolutely perfect, but you certainly can if you'd like. Scale handles independently. And then now we have this, we want to turn this into a mesh. So I'm going to go ahead and go back into object mode, and that shows our curve. And I'm going to now say object in the object menu and then convert to mesh. Now this is a mesh, which allows me to go back into edit mode, and you can see all the points that have been added. I'm going to select A for all, and then F for fill, and that creates a face for me. This face is a great starting point here. I'm going to go ahead and go back into object mode and then view frame selected, which is also the period on your keyboard. And now I am ready to start my modeling. I'm going to show the top again so that we can see the top, or it might even be better to see the bottom depending on how this thing is laid out for you. I'm going to go ahead and show the top on mine. And if we want to, we can also show the main body, although it's not necessarily required. We want to move this thing back, so I'm going to grab along the y-axis and make sure that it is in the body itself. I actually recommend this being at Y0, so it's in the very center, because we are going to use a mirror tool later. Now that I have this thing in place, we're ready to begin our extrusions. So looking at this from the top, I'm going to go into edit mode, and then I'm going to extrude, I can't see it right now. It's actually on the bottom. So I'm going to go ahead and navigate to the bottom. I just extruded out to that first area. We can go ahead and do that again just for fun. Here we're going to extrude out to that first and original bend, and then just as we did with the main body, we will scale this. This happens to be a pretty good size as is right now, so I don't have to. But looking at from the bottom, if we extrude again, let's come out to about right here, and then press S, and we're going to scale all axes here. So we're just pressing S, then grab along the X and make that move and line up. Again, the whole goal is to try to extrude and have it match along these sides. I am extruding or scaling, sorry, along all the axis because the wing does get thinner as it gets towards the end. Again, extrude, come out as far as you need to, and then scale, bring it inward, grab along the X, and move that in. Repeat this until you get to the end. The very end is tricky. It is a lot of curve in there, and you might have to do a few of these in order to make it sort of line up exactly the way you'd want to. Since this is just a model for, demonstration purposes, do not need to get too detail oriented. If we were going to make this exact, we'd actually use parametric modeling and not a blender. So extrude along here. Again, scale, bring it inwards, and that looks pretty good. That is one set of our wings. Now if we look at this from the front view, we actually notice that this is actually a bent wing. The wing is going to come down and then back up. So we're going to need to fix that. And we're going to do that by going to the front view of this plane along the x-axis, and I can see there's a bend right here. I'm going to go ahead and use my loop cut tool, which is here, spacebar R, and click and drag over to where that bend is at, and then grab along the z-axis and move this thing downwards. We also need to do this at the front of our plane, and I'm going to go ahead and do that by hiding the main body and loop selecting with R that front face, grab along the Z, and move that until it matches our curve. We're going to loop select the rest of these as well. I'm going to go ahead and use my edge selection tool and press Option, select this loop, grab along the Z, move it down, Option select. That one's actually pretty good in place. I'm going to Option select this one. Now, if you zoom in on this, what we're trying to do is select the vertical axes here, and we can actually hold down Shift and loop select to select multiples of these to make this a little bit easier for us. Here are all 4 of those, and we're going to grab Z, move them upwards, Shift, Option select to unselect that loop, grab Z, move upwards, Shift, Option, grab Z, and just do this until you've gotten to the very end. So that is a rough version of our plane. You can definitely detail that more, but for the sake of length of this video, we're going to stick with that for now. So the next thing we want to do is we have the other wing we want to make. And instead of duplicating this, we're actually going to mirror it. So go back into object mode. And just for fun, I'm going to show my main body there, and I'm also going to show the right side. You'll see why in a second. So I have shown my right image and my main body. And now that we have this, we're going to use a modifier of mirror. So here is the mirror modifier. And I want to mirror over the top of that right image. So I'm going to use this mirror object function over here, select it, and use that to select my right object. Now all I have to do is select the correct axis, and it's not X, but it is Z. And now I have both of my wings, and it looks good. And if I edit one, I can go ahead and go into object mode here. If I edit any of these things, it will reflect exact on the other side. So if I grab my Z, you can see that I'm actually affecting both sets of wings, which is amazing, and it looks good. So that is how you do the wings. You're going to repeat that same process for this back tail wing over here. We'll do a different process for this wing, but you want to duplicate the exact same concept that we did for this back tail wing. Thank you. So I have gone ahead and made the back wings, also known as the horizontal stabilizers, and labeled those as well. I used the same method. I just utilized the smaller profile here and extruded them along and applied the mirror, and now I have my back wings. The next step is to create this vertical stabilizer, which is this back tail vertical piece here. And I'm going to do this one using a path instead of a circle, because it will allow me to sort of build it faster since it's a bit of a more complex curve. So adding my cursor here to the top, I'm going to say add curve, and this time we're going to use Bezier. I do want to make sure this is rotated on my 90 degrees on the x-axis, and that it is small. Yours might come in large. I'm going to bring mine in small, and then go ahead and move into edit mode. Now this works the same way as the circle, but we have an open-ended. Now we have one vector point here and another vector point here. I'm going to select them and go ahead and just move them into the bottom parts of this object. And you can go ahead and hide the main body if that also helps. I'm going to place this one at the top. This curve naturally already fits along there pretty closely. There's some little spaces that can be fixed, but it naturally kind of fits a little bit already. Now we're going to select this end, and what we want to do is add more points as we're going down. And we can do that by extruding. So we're going to say E to extrude, and then go ahead and move that thing all the way down to the bottom curve of our object. We can scale this in as well, and voila, we've already traced most of this. In order to finish this off, we're going to have to connect these two points from this point to that point. And I'm going to do that by holding down Shift and selecting both points, and then pressing F to fill. Now I'm going to hide my main body, as like I mentioned earlier, and you can see that it has filled in those spots. And go ahead and sort of hide my right as well so you can see. And it does have a shape. We can make these a little bit easier to handle by pressing on this one handle and then V for vector and turning that to a straight line. Again, on this side, select this handle, V for vector, and now we have a straight line. From here, it's pretty simple. Go back into object mode. Object, we want to go ahead and turn this thing into a mesh. Edit mode, select all, fill, and now we have the plane that we can utilize. And now this is pretty easy. We're just going to extrude a little bit here, and now we're just going to bevel each edge. So I'm going to select this face and then use my bevel tool, bevel this side inwards just a little bit, not too far. Do the same thing to the opposite side. Bevel this in, not too far. We want to make sure it sort of matches and gives us sort of a blade edge on there. Closer view, the idea is to have that nice round front there. And then voila, back into object mode. Go ahead and show the main body, and it is in place. Now we did extrude only on one edge, so you will actually need to move this thing over to center it a little bit, and that's okay. You can do that. And that is the back tail piece. That concludes most of our main body. We will do the propeller next. Now that we have completed the main body, our next step is to do the propellers. I'm going to go ahead and hide all of the images that I'm no longer using. I'm going to keep the front because we're still going to use the front for these propellers. And my next step is to actually view this from the bottom. So I'm going to go ahead and zoom in on this part of the engine here where I'm going to attach a propeller, use my 3D cursor to actually place something right there, and then we're going to add a mesh circle. This is a circle that is already a mesh, and that'll make it easier for us to do some edits. I'm going to make only about 15 or so vertices, and my radius is small enough to actually fit on the end of this little edge of this object. I'm not sure what that piece is actually called. So from this point, we're going to go ahead and do some scaling. So finish this and then scale, and I only want to scale, I'm kind of making an oval object. So scaling on the x-axis, bring it into about right there. If you'd like to make it a little bit smaller on the y-axis, you can do that as well. But we want to make sort of this oval shape. Looking at this again from the side, you can see that it's just sort of floating there. Now we're going to go into edit mode. Looking at this from the bottom, other view of this, there we go. And we want to extrude. But before we can do that, we have to select all with A, and then F to fill, and then there is our actual face. Now that we are there, we do need to extrude up a little bit, so I'm going to go ahead and click this face here. This is a very small object, I'm aware. It's a little bit hard to show here, but we want to bring that one up a little bit. Oh, sorry, I'm in bevel mode. Extrude, bring this up a little bit into the propeller head, and then select that bottom face and extrude downwards. So this is where we look at it from the front. And we're going to extrude down to about right here, and then scale that up to make it match. Zoom in closer for you. We're going to do another extrusion all the way down to here. Scale that one inward because it does change their shape. If we need to grab along the Y, do some adjustments, we can do that as well. And then, of course, here on the end, we want to round that off. So we're going to extrude one more time, bring it down, and then bevel this inward to create a sort of a round shape at the end. There we go. So now we've created one, we need to create the rest. And to do that, we're actually going to select all. And then on the left-hand side here, there is a spin or a spin duplicates, and we're going to use the spin duplicates. In this case, we want to spin along the x-axis. And our steps are going to be 2 because I only want 2 more of them because there's 3 total. To do that, now we're going to drag and grab this thing and spin it around until it matches the front view. You may need to look at this on the front view just to make sure. And you can see mine is a little bit off there. The reason it's off is because I'm spinning around the 3D cursor point. So I'm going to actually go ahead and stop this, or press undo, and change my 3D cursor to be the very center of the end of my propeller head here. And then repeat that again. So spin along the x-axis. Make sure there's only 2 of them. Then drag this plus button and go around in circles until we've matched our propeller, or close to it. And that will conclude how to do those propellers. Go back into object mode. There is our propeller. If you'd like, you can also finish off the rounding of your main body by going to here, the main body, and I'm going to extrude this guy out just a little bit and then bevel him down. There we go. That is the propeller. Don't forget to actually name your objects. So in here, this circle, let's name that propeller. Okay, so now we have the basics of our plane complete. We are not going to demonstrate the wheels in this particular exercise. We want to move on to actually creating the texture or the images on top of this to make this look realistic. So I'm going to go ahead and hide my top and my front and my right so I have just my plane. The other thing we need to do is to solidify some of our modifiers. So we have our wing here that has a mirror modifier, and we want to actually turn that into a single object, and we're going to do that by clicking on this little right drop down menu right here. That drop down menu has an apply button, and you cannot go backwards on this, so once you apply it, it is done for good, but this is now a single object instead of one object that is mirrored over the top. You want to do that again for your back tail, and here we're going to say apply. Next, what we want to do is actually start adding in the imagery. So I'm going to go ahead and select this, and then we're going to start adding in materials. So I'm going to go to my materials editor. I'm going to say new. I'm going to call this my UV map. UV map is the way that we can map different faces to our image that we're going to use to cover this whole thing. For this, we're actually going to go up into the shading tab. So there is a shading tab up here, and you can click on that and it will give us this kind of view, this workspace. And in here, what we want to do is establish that texture. So you need to go and find wherever it is that you had saved your images. And I want to actually grab this UV image and drag it into this node space. So this is considered our node space. This is our 3D viewport. These are our files. And this is our UV map area. And I'm actually going to change the way this looks here in a moment to show you how that works. But first what we want to do is connect. So here I have the UV map image, and I have a output node here on the right hand side. These are considered output nodes, and these are considered input nodes. So I'm going to connect my color output from the map to my base color, and that will provide it with an actual map. Now we can't see that here quite yet, and that's what we're going to fix. So what we want to do is we actually want to make sure that we are viewing this viewport shading, and this, instead of just having a regular shade, this is actually going to give us some of our texture. This is a rendered texture, and we are going to fix how this works. So the first thing we want to do is actually view this from the top. And in my viewport, just for this particular case, I'm actually going to change my layout here. So I'm going to right click on this area and join these areas, and I want this one to come down because I don't need those nodes anymore. I also don't need these files anymore. So I'm going to do the same thing over here. I'm going to join areas and sort of push this one up to give myself the map and my model. So here's my model. I'm going to go into edit mode after selecting the wings. So the wings are selected. Go to edit mode and then drag select all of these edges. Use the face tool. I find that this is working a little bit better if you face select and then click and drag all of the faces on that wing. Now go to view and frame selected just to give ourselves a nice little view of it and as a good starting spot. And our next job is going to be to go up to this UV menu up here. This UV menu is going to help us map these faces to our image. So I'm going to say UV and then project from view. What's happening is that it's taking these faces and placing them onto our map over here. And we can actually edit and change the location using all of our typical grab, scale, rotate tools as we had before. So here I'm going to grab this, and since this is the top, I'm going to move it over to my top view, scale it, and make it fit just inside of that image. If it's a little bit big, you can change that as well. So here I have it mapped as close as I possibly can. So there is the top. I can repeat this for the bottom. I'm going to go ahead and view this from the bottom. Drag select all of this. You can see some of my faces were already in that existing one. UV, project from view, and there you can see that a UV map shows up. I'm going to rotate in this case. I'm going to rotate this all the way around, and then grab, move it over into the center, scale, and drag it out. That gives us a nice little top and bottom of our wings, and we're going to repeat that for our main body as well. Again, you may want to go do some cleanup, select particular ones like this. You can see this is on the wrong side, so I can go ahead and grab that one, move it over, and I'm going to need to rotate that one all the way around. Oh, sorry, I'm doing that in the viewport. Make sure you do this in the UV map here, area here. Rotate, move that around, and you can have it. You can see that it is recoloring based on its new position. There we go. So that's the basics of how this works. I'm going to go ahead and do the rest of them just to keep it on this demonstration. Go back into object mode. Looking beautiful, looking nice. There's some cleanup we can do, and that's okay. Now I'm going to select the main body, and we're going to do the same thing. Go into edit mode, view this from the top, and of course we don't have this thing, we don't have the imagery on here. You can go ahead into the materials section here, do this little drop down menu and select UV map, and it will map to it. You can see the map shows up here, and I want to do this one from, see, I have a decent top view over here. This is going to work pretty good, but we also have a side view. There's going to be some conflict going on here. So I'm going to go ahead and just try this from the top first. Select all of this here. UV, project from view, and now you can see it has shown up here. Select all of this, grab, drag it in, and hopefully your model matches well. And you can see that it has mapped those top ones. Okay. You can see some of the edging on here is not going to be what we want. So now we can also try this from the side. So I'm going to try this on the side as well. Drag, select, UV, project from view, and that's pretty good. This is actually the wrong side, but that's okay. Select all and scale, and actually just go all the way until it goes to the other side. If you do this on the, if you press X, it will do it only on the X. Grab, drag this down, and you can see I'm sort of mapping it exactly as needed. That looks pretty good. Let's go to the other side. I know this may look simple, me doing it, and it's actually a bit more complex than what it appears. Don't worry, it's going to take some time. It's going to take some effort, but you eventually will practice it and get better at it. Here I am adding in this one as well. That one's pretty good. And there we have our modeled main body. Go ahead and do that for the back wings as well. Let's see, object mode, select this back wing, go into edit mode. We're going to view this from the top. Click, drag, select, UV, project from view. Oh, I did not add in the material. Do not forget to use this drop down menu to add that material. Edit mode, select all, there we go. Project from view, that's a better representation. Grab, move it over, and you can place it right on top. Looking pretty good. You can zoom in and actually get this thing exact as much as you need. Let's go ahead and flip that over. Just do the bottom. Grab all of this, UV, project from view, and in this window, select all, grab and move that over here. Not bad. You may need to make some adjustments. You may need to do your own work on that, but that is how the UV mapping works. Feel free to do this for every part. We're going to leave the cockpit to for our own materials. We'll do some other materials there, and then this propeller will also add in our own materials. If you want, we can just go ahead and press plus and just go ahead and make this one black. That's a pretty easy one there. And then we'll do some glass materials for our other material. So here's object mode, again, edit, In this case, I'm going to do the side view, so I'm going to look on the right, select all, UV, project from view. Do not forget, again, as I keep doing, to select that actual map. That's helpful. There it is, UV, project from view, and we are going to scale on the X because this one needs to be flipped around. Oh, so actually we don't need to flip that one around. We just need to grab it, drag it down, and scale it in. Make sure that thing fits on there exactly as we hoped. Okay, pretty decent. There's that side. Let's flip to the other side. Select all, UV, project from view. Again, we're going to have it. This one is going to be the wrong direction, and that's okay, because we can scale along the X and just flip that guy right over, and then zoom into this guy and scale him in until he fits. Maybe giving me myself a little bit more width here, and voila. Okay, that is the main UV mapping sequence. I hope that was easy, and now we'll move on to the procedural textures for this glass. So the glass on the windshield is actually pretty easy. If you select that windshield and then you add a new, we are in the materials area here, a new material, and go ahead and call this glass. There is an existing glass sort of surface underneath this surface option. Right now it says principled BSDF, but if we click on this, we can go to glass BSDF and go ahead and change the roughness all the way down, and that will make that into glass. That's all we have to do for that. The next thing we can do is make sure we also have materials for the front and for our other areas as well. If you want to, you can go into edit mode and you can select different areas, like this area here, maybe not some of these, but just on the side. We can go ahead and select some of this here, and we can add a new material again in the materials pane. There's more than one slot, so you can come over here, and right now it's UV map, but there's a plus button, and an object can contain more than one material. Here I'm going to go ahead and make a new material and call this steel, and go ahead down to my base color, give it a color, kind of a grayish look to it, then also move down to roughness and make it not rough, and the last one I want to do is the metallic. So there's transmission, metallic, there's my metallic right there. We're going to move that up. And you can see a preview of this if you'd like underneath all of this, underneath a volume. Oh, underneath the preview area here. So you can see a preview of your actual material, and you can change it as you need. And then if you have some spaces or some faces that are selected, you can then click on the steel material and click assign, and it will change just the selected stuff to that material. And that's how you get multiple materials. Go ahead and color this as you need, as you'd like. Make sure it looks really good, and then that will be it for your materials.